to nice Marin Highlands. That's where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You ever been there?
I've been through Marin, but I've never actually spent much time except for one quick conference in San Fran.
Straight to wine country. That's what we did. We skipped Marin, went straight for wine country.
How do I get into this thing and share it?
Okay, so go to Building Bellingham Podcast on Facebook, and it is now live. And I'm going to click on it. If you go to posts.
Oh, look, it's us.
It's us. It's happening right now.
Except for one quick conference in San Fran.
Straight to boom. There we go. And then just share it, and we are good to go.
Share.
Boom.
Post. If my kids walk in on me, I'm sorry. It's school time and mom's had to run some errands, so just bear with me if we have some technical difficulties there.
No worries. This is the it's the ultimate reason behind Pivot. The fact that you've got kids walking in and the back of your Zoom call is the perfect example of why we're having this call. So, Dustin, thank you for joining me today on the Building Bellingham series, the Pivot focused series on what we're doing every day to move forward, right? Just focusing on what we can control. And you've been doing a lot of focusing on what you can control since you started in the business.
I have, yeah.
What do you do, and what's going on in your world right now?
Well, I work at Caliber Home Loans as the branch manager, so we're just working with a lot of rapid change, trying to reassess where we're going to land, what the new normal is as it pertains to rent, lending, and risk guidelines. And so it's just a world where a lot of grace is demanded. And it's kind of the only way to get through this. So it took some adjustment. The getting home part actually wasn't the adjustment so much for me. It was actually pretty easy working from home. The bigger challenge has just been the level of effort. I would say I worked harder than I've ever worked before. And sometimes it feels like you're working harder and you're making less things happen. And it certainly feels like that right now, I think. However, I'm starting to see, the broader positive results of those efforts. Our branch has really been cohesive, working through it together, providing that grace to our ops partners and that understanding of kind of what's going on. And hopefully we're seeing a path out the other end over the next few months.
Yeah. Well, and you're a leader, and you lead yourself, you lead your family, obviously, with your wife. And, as a leader in your company, how do you focus on little wins? I know that we can get so focused on these, like, how do I hit a home run every day? But me and you, we're base hit guys, right? How do you keep hitting base hits?
I don't know. Let's think on that one. We talk a lot about the compound effect.
Yeah.
I've never been a grand slam guy. I've never been looking for the grand slams, right? So I've always just focused on trying to do the little things right every day and what those can compound and add up for, building that momentum. I think momentum is an undervalued concept in sales, and in, everything in life. It takes time for things to build up. One of my favorite sayings is 10 years of hard work and you're an overnight success.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of that base hitting methodology, right? You just keep putting one on base over and over and over, and slowly but surely that leads into a lot of plays and a lot of scores. And so we do stay focused on that. But it can be a challenge. Some days you want that big win.
Well,
and some days you get it.
Yeah. So for you, on a day where you have, and I have these days too, where we have these, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with COVID-19. It's just on a normal day, we have a big loss. Maybe we have, something fall out that we were expecting to go through, but we still have these maybe 3 things that are smaller. How do you stay positive through that? I mean, that's such a challenging thing to do when you get kind of knocked from the right, and then you get an opportunity on the left, right?
I don't always stay positive through it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to give yourself some time to lick your wounds, but you have to know when to turn that on and when to turn that off. If you find yourself licking your wounds for a couple of days, that's far too long. You should give yourself a couple hours max, right? The biggest way, though, I think, is it's sort of, where is your foundation? So if you if you have a lot of other business going on because you didn't put all your eggs in that basket, then that's not such the same issue as if that was the only positive thing you had going on in your business. So not getting fixated on what's going right and just staying the course, just keep playing your plays no matter what's going on. That'll definitely put you in a better position to kind of work through things.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've been a mentor to me in a lot of ways, and talked a lot about proactivity. We talk about base hits, but when you compare people that are, going through this right now, and they're basically like their whole business is flipped upside down because of this, versus
Mhm.
somebody that has been preparing and preparing and preparing for all this time and been proactive, what do you see as the big defining factor for those people, and how have you done that for your own business?
Yes. Pretty good question. I would just say everything is great when everything's great. And you got to stay focused on keeping the fundamentals, the vitals, and the health of your organization in ship shape, because that way, when things do start to fall apart, you can continue to work and operate in that environment. And then instead of becoming a challenge, it becomes an opportunity. And so much of it does have to do with our perspective too, right? So something I learned a long time ago was the phrase "event plus response equals outcome." I've always liked that because it puts the situation into your control, right? Because you can't necessarily control the event, but you can always control your response. So having the right perspective um, is really going to clarify who's going to come out of this on top, and who's really going to suffer through this and lose momentum because they're focused on the wrong things.
Absolutely. It's not about what happens, but what happens next, right? It's that whole concept. And
Yeah,
and
you got to be able to take control. If you're not in a position where you can, it doesn't have to be your responsibility, but it has to be, you know, you have to figure out a way to take every external event and take control of it, because I mean, what else can you do? Living a life where, oh, it's not in my control, therefore it's not my responsibility. That's just not a life where you can really get very far. So in order to change something, you must first be able to control it. And so that's where that really comes in handy. It's just a really kind of easy mental trick to turn something that's completely out of your control to, sure, it's not necessarily my fault, but it is my responsibility, and then move forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you're a strong proponent in having a team, and not necessarily just a team at work, but a team at home. Tell me a little bit more about team and the future of business as we see it.
Well, I think in our conversations, it's been related to the real estate and the mortgage lending business. We do see that it does seem to be a more make sense business as it pertains to teams. The kind of the classic old way of doing business is maybe you had someone cover your book of business. Maybe you weren't sure kind of how trustworthy they were, or not trustworthy. That's not the right word, but maybe your business wasn't being put first. And it can be kind of like a lone wolf type of business. Bringing the teams element into it, where I know more and more realtors are having teams. I know the business is just growing in spades in the team sector of real estate, and I'm seeing the same thing happen in mortgage lending. I think it's just a more long-term, sustainable, and fun way to do business, and also provide a consistent experience internally and externally, because you're not just depending on one person. So someone has a bad day per se, and they just don't bother showing up or calling back, right? There's a lot of people to pick up where just create some consistency there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where when we think about what's most important, which is the experience to the client, like you were talking about, and
Yeah,
that day might be me or you, right?
totally. Oh yeah.
So it's not saying it could be someone on our team. It's saying this totally could be one of the leaders, in the company. So how important is the customer experience to you, and how do you think this is an opportunity to fine tune that customer experience?
Well, we've long said on our team that the process is the product that we sell.
Yeah.
So it is everything to us, the customer service experience. If you were to look at, I've got my mission and my value statement right here on my desk. I look at it every morning, and it's all about defining, creating that customer service experience, make sure that we're doing our part for sustainable home ownership. I I think it is the fundamentally most important thing that we are doing. I sell a 30-year fixed mortgage. There's a lot of places you can go get a 30-year fixed mortgage, right? So it really does become the process, and the brand and the reputability and the consistency does really become the product. Um, and I think at a time like this, it's a really good opportunity to fine tune your product, and it's a really good opportunity to step up and be extra transparent. I found that in markets like this, everyone is understanding that things are changing in real time, and being able to be out in front of that, talk to your clients, talk to your borrowers, whoever they may be, about, hey, these are the changes that we're seeing. This is the potential impacts, and really acting in that advisory role. I think it just makes such a huge difference right now, where we really are kind of operating in an uncertain environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you're talking about jumping ahead of the curve, whereas most people are reacting, right, to,
Yeah,
day by day, whatever comes out that day with all the
right.
COVID-19 updates. And you're saying, I'm going to jump ahead and just say, this is as bad as it could be. And I want you to know that because you're important to me, and what you know about how to respond or how to move forward is important to me. Is that right?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time trying to see what's coming next, see what's coming, 2 or 3 steps ahead, so that we can guard our pipelines and guard our clients against that, and kind of, like you said, get out in front of that curve. That's a big part of the lending business, anyways. Because on the one side, we're seen to be selling loans to. It's weird. My hands kind of like, it's just, anyways. I'm doing hand motions here.
This is
On
how
the
he
one,
does that. Like this.
yeah, I know. On the one side, what I think everyone sees is us talking to consumers and talking to clients, and we're salespeople. But remember, we have this whole other element to doing mortgage loans, and we have to get it through underwriting. We have to get your file approved, and sometimes that's easy, and sometimes it's not. And one part of being a good loan officer is being able to look 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of how the underwriters are going to react, and what your potential issues are and what your potential backup plans are. So that's always how we run our business, and it's how all the best LCs I know also run their business.
And how important is it for you to, in those situations where you're assessing someone's financial situation, a lot of someone's, you know, current, past, and future plans have a lot to do with finances. Whether you like to talk about it or not, it has a lot to do with what you do on a daily basis. How,
Sure.
how do you have that conversation with someone that may be overly optimistic or underly optimistic? What does that coaching sound like to a potential borrower?
It's just different for every person. I mean, we want people to be rooted in the reality of the situation, and we also want them to understand that there's always a way to get into the path of homeownership. A lot of times we're not pre-approving people, we're pre-approving people, right? So it's all right, here's the map, these are the directions, you need to take steps A, B, and C, and we can get you here. I think what we're dealing with now more than ever, though, is just people simply not knowing. And they don't know what's going to happen in the market, and they don't know if things are going to be good and bad, and they don't know what's going to happen with their job. And our job is to lend responsibly, and we can only lend to people that currently have income sources or some other mitigating factor. I mean, there's a myriad of different options and ways to get through underwriting, but the bottom line is we can only loan to people who can, at the time of closing, repay on that mortgage. um, and other people, they're uncertain about the housing market, and they're uncertain about this, and I've really refrained from trying to advise people that everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it, the market's going to jump back. And because I've just never been through a pandemic before, and I don't think any of us have. And I feel like what I'm seeing is good for the market. What I'm seeing is people out there offering on homes and buying homes, and I don't see indications that things are going to stop. I just also feel like it's it would be intellectually dishonest of me to be an absolutist and say, hey, everything's just going to be fine. I can tell. And that's, again, serving in that advisory role. We want to give people the best information we know, and we also want them to be able to make their own decisions, because it is a big deal to buy a house, and it is a big deal to get a 30-year mortgage. You better feel good about it when that starts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I like the concept of pre-approving. And
Yeah.
for those that are watching this show right now and will watch this show, don't worry, it's not another step. It's just part of the preliminary education process. And it's when someone says, hey, I want to set you up for the best possible experience. That's what that is. It's not saying I want you to do more work. It's to say, I want this to be successful for you. And therefore I want you, this is the homework that you need to do to be best prepared. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, I think for the most part, and I know there's some outliers here, but I would say everyone pretty much wants to own a house, right? That's a pretty common desire for people. And so a lot of times what we get is someone that wants to wait to come in and talk because they want to work on saving up a down payment, or they want to work on improving their credit. And our message back to them is, yeah, that's fine, you can wait, but we have tips on how you can do those things faster. I can help you get your credit from here to there in a shorter amount of time, or I can help you with other ways to come up with a down payment, or maybe look at a different down payment option, or so it's just like anything. I mean, if you got to go in and talk to the experts in order to figure out what your plan is going to be, right? Like, you wouldn't draft up house plans without talking to a general contractor.
Right.
And whether you do the job or not, or have the project done or not, you want to get that professional advice to figure out how it might make the most sense to do that job. And it's the same with us.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting. You say everyone should want to own a house, and I want to jump into that a little bit more because, and maybe if you don't mind sharing your specific story on what has homeownership done for you in recessions, in downturns, in tough times when you're building your business. How important is homeownership for you?
For me personally, I now have the benefit of having been, so I've been in the business for about 15 years, and I have the benefit of having been in the business long enough to remember my first time home buyers who were on the verge of being turned down. I'm thinking about a very specific couple that I still talk to all the time. And I was over at their house, and, there's tears flowing, and we're just like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to get it worked out. And now we figured it out. They got that house. Now they have $200,000 in equity, right? And it's just completely dramatically transformed and changed the life decisions and the security that's created, so they can take their lives in new paths, and they can take different risks that they might not have been able to take if they didn't have that struggle back in 2009. And for context, that's after we were coming through, kind of in the midst of the Great Recession, where everything was even harder to borrow than it is now. And personally, we went and we bought a condo, and we bought it for $140,000 back in like 2006. And it was worth $90,000 during the recession. And, we just hung on and hung on and hung on, and ultimately sold it for a profit. But during that time, what it provided us was, we didn't have to worry about being evicted. We didn't have to worry about being anything. Like, as long as we just paid our little mortgage, which was pretty much cheaper than rent at that point, even back then, we had a stable playing field in order to go and focus on the other things in our life that we needed to do, which for me was work, 12 hours a day during that time.
Yeah. So, you're talking about stability, just emotionally, mentally, physically, all of the things, right? You have the confidence that if something bad happens, all you have to do is figure out how to pay your own mortgage. You're not going to get booted, right?
Yeah.
And you had that stability knowing that even though it was tough in that time, that you would be able to, how did you know that? How did you know that in the future, if you just waited it out? I mean, at this point, you'd been doing it for not that long, doing it in the business. How did you know to just say, I'm going to wait? Was it just a gut check, or what was it?
House prices just always go up long term. They just
Yeah.
don't not. I mean, unless we have some kind of war on American soil, is always the thing I say, is the only thing I can really perceive. I'm sure there's other things, but I mean, almost everyone in this whole that could ever watch this could ask their parents, and what houses did you own, and you could look at the value of all those houses, and they'll all be dramatically up from that price they bought them from and sold them from. And my parents always drove it into me and said the greatest regret I had was, ever selling any house. I just imagined what they could be worth today.
Yeah.
And so I had that belief. I had always been told that was the way it worked. I'd seen the charts. I understood the economics. And, they're just not making more land, right? Can't do it.
There's not a land factory somewhere?
There's a volcano in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Build some land, but I don't know if I would want to live there in that lava flow.
No. Well, it's funny that you say that, because my dad actually, his go-to phrase when I was asking when's the best time to buy a house before I got into real estate, he would say, 30 years ago when I bought in Seattle. And I'm like, of course it is. He bought $80,000 in Seattle, or $120,000 in Seattle. And so,
So many of our parents have those stories, and it's just the same question as when is the best time to plant a tree, right?
yeah,
30 years ago, second best time is now.
yeah. Or yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't mind diving into this a little bit, but what are you seeing as far as guidelines go with your company and kind of the industry standard? How are those being tightened up? Is it something that, because I've had some people come to me kind of freaking out about it, saying we're never going to
Yeah.
be, what, how can you like squash that? What are you seeing?
All right, well, first of all, I would say that all of this change is temporary. Um, it's extremely unprecedented to live in a world where we may see 15 to 20% basically forced unemployment. And we think it's short term, but we really don't know how much will turn into long term unemployment. We are in a world where, anyone can choose to go into forbearance and stop making their payments without a proof of hardship. So lending in that environment, we have to lend to people that can make their payments, and everything's so fluid. So what you're seeing a pullback on the lower credit score tiers of government loans, so like FHA, VA loans for the most part. And again, I'm not speaking globally because everyone's at a different place. For the most part, you're seeing a 620 minimum credit score, whereas before you would see down to like a 580. You're seeing some different various pullbacks on the way that people are calculating self-employment income, rental income, because there are fears that most renters aren't paying their rent, and there are fears that most self-employed employees aren't necessarily going to make the same amount in 2020 as in 2019, where we can only use the 2019 tax returns to qualify. And you're seeing kind of a pullback on some of the jumbo products, some of the non-conventional. So that's any loan amount over $510,400 in Whatcom County. That can vary by county, and some of the other zero down stuff. And it greatly varies from lender to lender. And what do people talk about? Is it a U-shaped recovery? Is it a V-shaped recovery? Is it a W-shaped recovery? As far as the economy, well, we ask ourselves the same question about guidelines. Because if we can figure out what the certainty is and where we need to be, we should be able to just bounce right back and start dropping these off within the next month or two. That just remains to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah. And for somebody that's, in that stage right now where they have a good job and they're still employed, what kind of advice would you give people, even if they're temporarily unemployed? What's the best kind of homework they can do, and as far as talking to somebody like you, to get prepared for buying a home?
Well, we'll always talk to you, whether you're employed or whether you're currently not employed, and we know that you're planning on going back to work. We always want to work with people to get them pre-approved. So it's custom advice to kind of each person. My suggestion would be don't give up, and don't necessarily just buy into the headlines, because you're seeing headlines about these major banks slashing guidelines to you must have 20% down, you have to have a 700 credit score. That's the exception, not the norm. So please, talk to your trusted professional, whether that's your realtor, your lender, whoever it is, and keep marching forward, because as quickly as this came, it'll start to evaporate, this whole situation. I'm not saying, I'm not forecasting time. I'm just saying once it's fixed, it's going to be fixed pretty quickly, however that looks. Like if a vaccine comes out in 6, 9, 12 months, sure, that's a long time, but I would imagine that, boom, like everything's like, it's going to be looking very different at some point, like someone just flipped that switch back on. So heck, I mean, especially if you're not currently working and you have time, it's a good time to kind of get prepared and start figuring some things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that have purchased a home in the past, like that couple that you spoke about that purchased, even though it was a squeaking by, was able to purchase and now has that equity. What's a good thing to do right now? I mean, would you recommend going, obviously it's custom, it depends on the situation, but which direction do you recommend going between a home equity line of credit and a cash out refi? What's the best avenue right now to have liquidity, and use that asset you have?
Yeah, I do. I think it depends on your intent, whether you want just liquidity or whether you have an immediate need for the cash. If you have an immediate need for the cash, and depending on the rates and how they line up, a cash out refinance might work. What's nice about a line of credit, is it does take discipline, but if you get a line of credit, you don't have to pay any money on what you're not using. It's kind of like a credit card with a super low interest rate that's tagged to your house. So if you want it there just for emergency purposes only, I think a line of credit makes all the sense in the world. You can pay the application fee, and it probably costs under $1,000 to get that, which I'm not saying is cheap, but then all of a sudden you have $50,000 or $100,000 available to you, and you don't have to pay interest on that money at all until you use that money. Whereas with a cash out refinance, whether you keep that money in your bank account or you spend it on something, you have to pay interest on that money.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and obviously it depends on the situation. And right now is an absolutely awesome time to, even if you don't pull any money out, to refinance and drop your rate, because what are you seeing with rates right now?
Yeah, rates are in the low threes on the refis. They could possibly head lower. But right now, we have a lot of clients that are in the money insofar as a 12, 24-month break even on what they have to spend in closing costs versus when that monthly savings will break even on that.
Yeah.
So we would consider those very prime refinances. There's a lot of people that stand to save a lot of money right now, and that's definitely something worth exploring or getting in line for. The other thing is, whether it's Caliber Home Loans or any other lender, we're extremely inundated with refinances. So do please exercise some patience as we work through it, because it'll probably take us about 60 days.
Yeah, you talked about grace at the start, so have people exercise that grace too with you guys, right?
I really feel like, yeah, and I feel like people have been super understanding. There's a few one-offs that are getting a little extra upset, and I also have grace for that on our side, because it's a scary time, right? But for the most part, I think everyone understands that we're just in unprecedented times, and everyone's being super patient and understanding as we work through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just wanted to say that I really am proud of you for not having PTSD when I asked how rates were doing, because it's like when I hear how's the market, I just start going.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's a big and it's a valid, completely valid question, and it's hard to predict because things are just volatile. I mean, now that's a buzzword, right? We got all these buzzwords coming out, but they really are. Every day there's something new. There's some new issue, right? And it's like, so all we can do is play by the playbook that was given to us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump back briefly into branding. I mean, you're somebody that has been coaching me on brand and relationships since I got into the business. And tell me a little bit more, like, when things are good, you don't really need a brand. And honestly, like, relationships are important, but they're not as important as they are in a time like this. Tell me more about branding and relationships, because I know that's something you really, really focus on.
Yeah. I mean, branding has also become a buzzword, right? The marketing aspect of it. And I've never really thought about it like that. I've always thought about branding as being true to the reputation that you want to have, right? So we have let's see. We are like on our values. It says our reputation is our brand and it will not be compromised. We always do our best and do right by our team, coworkers, referral partners, and customers. And our values aren't long. It's maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs. And I think the way you create a brand is by figuring out who you want to be in the market, figuring out what you want to do, and making sure that you make the hard decisions when the time comes to make those hard decisions to stay true to your brand.
Yeah.
A logo is a different thing. A logo can be a representation of your brand, but your brand is your company's heart and who they are and when they're going to say yes and when you're going to say no.
Yeah. And how important is authenticity to that?
I mean, it's just, you can't be everything to everyone. Yeah. I think it starts with that key decision. And then once you figure that out, you figure out who you want to be and who you want to be that person to. And then you can create authenticity. It's hard to even be authentic when you don't even know who you want to be.
Yeah. Would you say this is a really good time to get very clear with that? I mean, if you haven't already, granted, if you haven't already figured out what your brand is, what your mission, your vision, your values are, what your team stands for, the heart of your team, I mean, that's an issue. But at the same time, this is also a really good time because we're so stuck in the business, this being an amazing time to start focusing on the business, right?
Like people's characters are created and tested in really bad times, right? Like, your skill set and everything, it's one thing, but the true test of your mettle and what you're capable of and where your limits are going to be in a time like this. This is a time for all of us, I bet, probably, that you'll look back and you'll say, well, at least, in 5 years, at least this isn't that, right? Yeah. And so it really will scour clean all of the noise and all of the BS and give you a really good introspection point to figure out like, where do you want to be? I mean, if you're consistently frustrated with X client or, you know, this person or this situation, whatever it is, like maybe that's not where you need to be, and maybe that's not who you need to be spending your time with. So yeah, being, you know, intentional about what you plan to do and how you're planning your business and who you want to be, and that understanding that you can't be everything to everyone, which is the hardest part for most people in business, has been my experience. Yeah, this would be a perfect opportunity to do that. And I would also say that it's probably one of the best ways to thrive in a situation like this.
Absolutely. And Dustin, one of my favorite metaphors that you threw out in our group session was find the signal, ignore the noise.
Oh, let's give Brandon Nelson credit for that, man. I loved it. I wrote it down too. What is it? Find the signal in the noise is what
Yeah.
he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. He threw it out. I repeated it, but yeah, man, totally love it.
Yeah. So, and how do you do that? I mean, I know it's kind of a general question, but if you're a business owner right now,
yeah,
or if you are at home unemployed and there's so much just external noise going on, there's Facebook, ping, 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 everybody giving their opinion. You know, everyone has their doctorate right now and can explain COVID-19. How do you just narrow your view, close your ears a little bit, put your horse blinders on, and focus on moving forward? How do you do that? That's tough.
Well, if you're in a room full of 50 people and someone across the room calls out your name, you're going to hear them, right?
Right.
That's called your reticular activation system. It's in your brain, and it's basically you understanding it. Maybe back here, I'm sure I'm not going to describe this like a scientist, what you want to hear and what you're interested in hearing. And then up here, that basically manifests, right? You did hear it, you did notice it, or you bought a new black truck and all of a sudden everyone has a black truck. You're like, wow. It's just, you know, first of all, again, back to what we were talking about, you have to intentionally choose the things that you do want to notice. Because if you're not paying attention to what you're intaking, right, you can start to become toxified very quickly. So that's what I'd say. Research the reticular activator system. That's why stuff like visualization and these things work, is because you're being intentional about what you want to see. And it's not necessarily that you're bringing something into your life. I mean, I don't want to get all the secret here, but it's because I think my theory is because it's not you're bringing something new that wasn't there. You're just happening to notice it because you're paying attention to it. Yeah. So you need to be extremely understanding of the things that you want to see and who you want to be. Again, back to the brand part, and it'll start poking out at you. For all the other stuff, figure out how to ignore it. You know, there's no reason to listen to people you don't agree with on Facebook. I like to snooze them for 30 days. That way in 30 days when they come back, then I'll be like, I wonder if they like change their opinion, or like I can secretly judge them and then decide whether I want to snooze them again or ignore or just delete people or unfollow. I mean, there's a million ways to do it, right? Yeah. It's not like we don't have the ability to filter it. It's just that a lot of people don't take the time to do it. Another thing I do is I have my phone's always on silent all day, which kind of annoys a lot of people I work with. Sorry, you gotta hit the office line if you really want to get me. My alerts are off, right? I don't get Facebook alerts. I don't get email alerts or pings and pangs and all this stuff, like, because it's just too distracting. When I want to pay attention to something, I'm clicking the out of office button. Like all that stuff, all those little things add up to a huge, huge tangible difference over time.
And just for the record, what is a pang? I know what a ping is. That's a notification.
Pang, it's a feeling you get in your stomach when you're just like, I just can't handle it.
you get the ping, and then it follows the pang follows.
The pang follows the ping.
Oh, beautiful. I know the feeling. I've been trying to put a finger on that feeling for a while, and it's just anxiety setting in from another notification.
Not as fun as ping pong. It's ping pang.
No, or beer pong. Yeah.
Or beer pong.
Yeah. Beer pong's good. Yeah. So it's so okay. So what you're talking about is not necessarily. It's about saying no, right? That's step one. Is like, what are you saying no to? What are you saying yes to? Because one yes is valid.
Step one is saying no to yourself.
How do you do that? What do you say no to?
I don't know. Let's see. What do I say no to? Anything that I think is like, how often do you like see someone on like social and you're like, this person, like, and then you start typing something and then you delete it? That would be you saying no to yourself, right? Yeah. That's one really clear example. But there's a million filters, or, you know, many filters that I've created over the years for what I am willing to do and what I'm not willing to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, first you got to reconcile those truths with yourself, and then you can bring it out into the market and tell people no.
Absolutely. So, I mean, so really, it's about authentically finding yourself, knowing what truly makes you happy. What are the core values that you have? Once you have those, it should be pretty easy to make a decision as to what's that noise, what's the actual signal, and then the next step is surrounding yourself with the right people. I mean, you've been
For
telling me
sure.
that since day one, right?
For sure.
And how important that is. How for people that are not feeling in control, that are watching this, that are business owners or people that live here in Whatcom County, and they're not feeling like they're in control. How important is like who you're talking to, who you're surrounding yourself, where you're getting your information from? How important is that?
I mean, information is just like food. If you eat healthy, your body will perform well. If you take in information healthfully, your mind will perform well. Your habits can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So I mean, that's a lot of isms, and but it's kind of everything. Who you surround yourself with is a reflection of who you are and who you want to be. And actively seeking out mentorship and guidance and asking questions and being open to suggestions. I think it'll make it's a huge difference for everyone, right? And I guess I feel kind of like in mortgages, we're an essential service. In real estate, you're an essential service, and I do, want to give honor to the people who really are in a situation where they're being told that they can't work. Like I can only imagine how tough that is. And so please don't, see this as, well, hey, you can still work. Like it's easy to make that advice. Like I don't know what I would be doing if I was in your situation, but I do think that the only way through this is understanding and staying in control of your perspective and what's important. Because
Yeah.
what else, even in that extreme example, literally, there's nothing else you can do. I mean, that's even more dramatic, where it becomes even more important to do these things and surround yourself and figure out what you can control. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. The lens that you look at the world through. And um, before we wrap up, I want to dive into something, and we can go as deep into this as you want, or we can touch on the surface. But one of the biggest things that I think a lot about is weatherproofing. You've taught me a lot about weatherproofing and how you live, not necessarily with all of the others. Like you don't follow the herd. How do you treat your business? Like say you have a massive month if you're a business owner, and then all of a sudden you have this like casino bell ringing in the background, like it's time to go, and you fill in this. Your world expands. All of a sudden, what you think you need expands. How have you built your business over the course of these 15 years and maintain that sense of like being grounded? Like,
that's a super hard question to answer. I'm trying to think tactically. One thing that because I've gone through periods of being grounded and getting a little too cocky and getting smacked back, like that is part of the process. But that does come a lot with who you surround yourself with. I think it's easy to want to be the big producer, and I think I've always wanted to. I've learned, I should say, through my business that I want to be a chaser, not a leader, meaning that if I hit a certain level, I want to find people that are, exceeding that level by a pretty large amount, so that I can see that there's always something to work towards and always step up towards. Like there is no arriving, there is no end point. There's only the journey, and staying grounded in that mindset, I think, is probably the best way to get there. As far as just the straight up spending cash, like you just got to manage it. You got to manage it with a budget. A lot of realtors I know are paying themselves salaries versus reaping it all. There's a lot of different ways for that, but you do have to have savings, especially if you're a commission only salesperson. If you don't, it makes it dramatically harder to sell. Some of the first things that I teach to some of my sales staff is that you have to have 3 to 6 months savings in the bank, and it will change the way that you interact with your clients, because the desperation selling will be gone, and it changes everything. So you do have to understand fundamentally that security and that savings will sort of compound on itself, and it will make you a better salesperson. It will give you a better business. It will give you a happier life, and really kind of filter through like what's important to you, and don't get sidetracked on that squirrel purchase, which can happen.
Yeah, coming from a place of grounded and, grounding and peace and just completely contribution. Like you want this to work out well either way. And there's the byproduct of making money because that's what we do. That's why we show up. That's why we create businesses, is to create
Sure,
value, but also to, help benefit our own lives. So that's huge.
sure.
Like focusing on that, people, do you ever find that people have trouble talking about money because they have this weird relationship where they think it's a bad thing, but what you just described was a positive thing. When you have money, you're
Mhm.
able to just lead by complete service.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, money's either emotional or tactical, right? I've learned that as well. A lot of people have their emotions tied up in money, and it's understandable with what the world's put on it. But it truly, especially just the baseline of having that 3 to 6 month savings, really starts to let you put your own destiny into your control. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Dustin, hey, I really appreciate you joining me today from the Marin
Yeah,
Highlands. Is it pretty chilly up there?
it's kind of breezy. It's nice though.
Is it?
Sunsetty. Time zone's a little off for the pick.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it feels like morning right now. It doesn't feel like that. Looks like, is that sunset or which way are we looking?
I have no idea.
Maybe that's sunrise. Maybe this is proper timing ish.
Yeah.
But, but I
Well,
appreciate
no,
it.
thanks for having me, Leo. Man, it's always a pleasure, and appreciate what you're doing. And yeah,
Absolutely. And if anybody has any questions about anything financial, mortgage related, you're totally welcome to reach out to Dustin via phone or via direct message, or reach out to me. I'm going to put all of your information on the Facebook posting here so people can know where to get a hold of you. But I always appreciate your insight. I always appreciate your expertise and being a good friend and a mentor to me and helping guide me to, I mean, where I'm at right now, I attribute a lot to you continually kicking me in the butt. So much appreciated to
thanks
you,
for that, bud.
man. Yeah,
I'll be here for that.
yeah, more butt kicking. And if you don't have someone in your life that's kicking you in the butt, get somebody that kicks you in the butt for sure.
Yeah, you don't really see anyone that's performing at their top tier without a mentor or a coach. That's not really an existent thing. So that's an important part of life is you got to keep learning. You got to keep aspiring to something and to someone.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in today to the Building Bellingham Pivot Series with Mr. Dustin Brumley coming at you live from the Marin Highlands, aka his bedroom downstairs. And we appreciate you, Dustin. And all details on Dustin's social media and website will all be in the comments and description below on this episode. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.